Welcome to episode 212 of the Pharmacist Voice podcast. I'm the host, Kim Newlove. Today's guest is Dr. Ashley Perkins. Ashley wears a lot of hats. In addition to being a pharmacist, wife, and mom, she's also a mental health advocate, educator, author, and TEDx speaker. In post-pandemic America, everyone's a little more sensitive now about mental health. If you have ever felt misjudged or misunderstood because you have a mental illness, or if you have misjudged or misunderstood someone with a mental illness, you will appreciate this episode. If you're new to the Pharmacist Voice podcast, welcome. Again, my name is Kim Newlove and I'm the host. I'm a pharmacist by training, but I'm not in clinical practice anymore. I made a career transition to voice actor and podcast host. Among other things, I narrate audiobooks for women pharmacist authors, provide medical narration to clients in the pharmaceutical, biotech, and continuing medical education industries, and I narrate content for explainer videos and e-learning projects. If you have a project in mind, contact me through my website, thepharmacistvoice.com. I was inspired by my nonverbal son who has autism to combine my background as a pharmacist with my speaking voice and launch my business, The Pharmacist Voice, in 2017. My son Craig helped me realize the power of having a voice and using it. My solo podcast episodes are about some aspect of being a pharmacist, a voice actor, a pharmacist podcaster, or my career transition from pharmacist to voice actor and podcast host. My interview shows feature a variety of people who use their voices to advocate for something like mental health, educate in some way, or entertain so that you are inspired to use your voice too. This is episode 212, and you can find the show notes on my website, thepharmacistvoice.com. Just click on the podcast tab and search for episode 212. Without further ado, here's my conversation with Dr. Ashley Perkins. Hi, Ashley. Welcome to the Pharmacist Voice podcast. How are you?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm great. Glad to have you with me today.
Thank you for having me.
My pleasure. All right, let's jump into it. You are on my podcast today because you use your voice as an advocate for mental health, an educator, and also an entertainer in the form of your TEDx talk. And you are an author who made the audiobook, and I can't wait to get into that.
Yes, I did. I wanted to make sure we accommodated all different types of people, especially those who can't focus on reading a paper book or an ebook. And a lot of people who follow me on Twitter had asked for an audiobook. So it was well worth the investment. And so I made sure that we had an audiobook available as well.
Awesome. Much respect. We'll get into that in a little bit. I want to start off with the mental health piece, which actually is kind of the topic of the book as well. You are a mental health advocate, and I would love to open it up to you to talk about your identity on Twitter and what you do and the organization that you co-founded.
Yes. So we started in 2020, right before the pandemic started. But how it really led up to that is in 2019, I was discriminated against for my mental health. As a pharmacist, it's never been anything that I thought I needed to hide for any apparent reason. So I've always been open because then people felt like I was a safe space to talk to. So that was why I've always been open about my mental health. But somebody felt the need within an organization that I volunteered for about 20 years. Someone within that organization felt the need to use that as a weapon against me. And I was in a leadership position at the time. And they went to the board president, and it was a big deal. I reported it like you're supposed to do. You report after something like that happens. Unfortunately, it was not handled appropriately. I, being the type of person I am, don't generally sit down and be quiet. So I pushed the situation more because, again, it's wrong. So I felt that at least needed some type of awareness because what if somebody else comes along and it happens again? So I pushed the situation. Something was still not done, but there was at least recognition that possibly something had gone wrong, and the word possibly was used. And then after seminar was over, they ended up pushing me out of my position. So the retaliation for reporting came because I was struggling because of all of the situations I had been put through, the stress, the anxiety. They used my behavior to get rid of me. So 8 months of this went on. I finally left the organization and was diagnosed with PTSD because of the situation that I was put through, because it was 8 months of bullying, verbal abuse, emotional abuse, gaslighting. I mean, it was probably one of the worst situations I've been put through with people that I was supposed to trust and were friends. So when I left, I said to them, this won't be the last time you hear from me. I'm going to raise awareness about this situation because this shouldn't happen to people. Here I am, someone of privilege and education. I didn't really know how to navigate the situation. I knew what was happening and I knew it was wrong, but I didn't know what else to do. So I decided that it shouldn't happen to other people. So I needed to do something about it. I have a great friend who also was part of the organization, who stayed by my side through all of it. And his name is John. And I came to him with this idea because I knew by sharing stories and our lived experiences, that's one of the greatest ways that we can help fight stigma and fight discrimination, is by sharing how everything that we've gone through, can share these stories to tell people this is what's happened, this is how it's wrong, and this is how we fight back. And that's how We Matter Too kind of came to light. John and I just decided that we were going to do this, and we were going to do it together. John and I have been through quite a bit together, so we just continued to be partners. And so, like I said, it was like the last week of February 2020 when we started our paperwork, and then the world exploded.
Yeah, that's exactly when it exploded too, wasn't it?
Yes. So starting a nonprofit during the pandemic was quite the interesting situation, but we've learned a lot, and we've really, I went to Twitter because I was on Facebook and I was like, these people know me. I need to get someplace where people don't know me. So I went to Twitter and I started a new account, and it's because I Matter. There's a thread and everything. Because I Matter, and I just started tweeting. I sharing my experiences like I do, talking about myself, talking about my mental health, talking about the things I go through. And we just started building a community of people sharing experiences. We talk about our experiences. They share experiences. We have we don't do it weekly. We do it like every other week, every so many weeks. But it's a hashtag share to help others. And what we do is I'll come up with like a prompt. What's your most troubling symptom with depression, is an example. And then people will just share. And what it does is it helps people put words to what they're experiencing. And so as you're reading, you can see what somebody else might experience, and you'll be like, oh, I experienced that, but I didn't know how to describe it. Now I know how to describe it. And we do that every so often, and it's grown over time, but this is what we wanted. We wanted to support each other while also sharing our experiences to help fight stigma. And we're able to do it. If I had ever said I'd be a pharmacist using social media or Twitter to connect with people, I would have laughed. But it has been a completely perfect way for us to do this and grow a community of people. And the pandemic it happened to be a good time to do it because we were wanting connection. And that's how We Matter Too happened.
Nice. I see you've got quite a following too. What are your numbers up to with followers?
I just hit 8,000.
Way to use your voice.
It has its moments. We have our bad with our good, but it has been such an honor to be a part of this community of people who come, and we're all different. We come from all different walks of life. We're all over the world. Just people wanting to share these experiences. And it's really a great way for us to be able to do it and have that reach so that everybody feels comfortable. And again, we've been able to do it on Twitter, and it's a safe place. Like, people feel as though it is a safe space where they can come and share experiences openly. I've been beyond amazed by the experience because people will openly share these experiences and connect with people in ways that I've not seen before. Now, it could have happened, but I've just not experienced it before, and I'm really proud of it.
It sounds like the mission is to fight stigma surrounding mental health issues. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because stigma is such an awful thing. And after going through it myself and experiencing it in the way I did, I just wanted people to understand that, yes, we get these labels and these diagnoses and everything like that. That's not what matters. They're there. And that's how we navigate life. We learn from these diagnoses so that we can navigate life better. But that's not what defines us as people. The people, the stories, the experiences behind all of those labels, that's what matters. And that's where all the, because I matter, we matter too, the title of my book, I Matter Too, that's where all of that comes from. It's not the labels, it's not those diagnoses, it's the stories and what we accomplish as people that matters.
In your book, I think I remember a line that I really loved. And you said, I am not my diagnosis.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's important for fighting stigma. I think anybody who doesn't really take that to heart needs to listen to that. I am not my diagnosis. So you have many mental health diagnoses. Would you like to talk about that and how you are not just that diagnosis?
Yes, absolutely. So, of course, from childhood, I've had ADHD, and I've known about my ADHD my whole life. Just recently learned that I'm also autistic. So I learned that probably about 6 months ago. So, of course, I've had that my whole life. I just have been clued in recently. And it's not shocking to me by any stroke of the imagination. And then I also have anxiety, agoraphobia, which anyone who doesn't know what agoraphobia is, that is fear of open spaces is the direct definition, but it's mainly people who won't go out and about, or they don't like to be in malls or busy stores and like that. The stereotype is the shut-in. I don't like stereotypes, but sometimes they're useful. And then I've also been diagnosed with OCD. And then my most recent one is my PTSD from the discrimination that I went through.
And after you had your son, I believe there might have been an additional diagnosis?
Yes, I went through postpartum depression after I had my son, which did land me in the hospital. I did have, unfortunately, as a medical professional, I don't generally sometimes take very good care of myself. And even though I was taking medication and seeing a therapist, which I thought was taking care of the problem, I may have ignored some other warning signs that were there. And I'm very fortunate for my friend Danielle, who's actually one of our board members for We Matter Too. I called her that morning and was talking to her. She's a licensed counselor. I was talking to her on the phone and she's like, Ashley, I think there's something wrong. This isn't normal, like, thought processes. And then I drove myself to work and I thought about driving my car into a pole. And I didn't even think, I just parked my car once I got to work and I went up and talked to my boss. Well, he's not my boss. He was just the store manager, but nonetheless, I just word vomited it all to him and told him, didn't think about any ramifications that could ever come to me. I just told him everything. And him being the good person that he is, took me straight to the emergency room. He wouldn't let me fight back. Like, I tried, but he took me.
He's a good guy.
Yes, absolutely. Had my husband meet me there as well. And they kept me in the hospital for 5 days, which was probably the first time I've ever actually just taken care of myself, because I like to take care of everybody else before myself. So it was probably the first time I really stopped to take care of myself. Now, I do a heck of a lot better now, but then I was very not good at it at all. So yeah, it was the first time. And that's why my doctor kept me in the hospital longer than the norm of 3 days. She kept me for 5 days because she knew if she let me out sooner, I'd just go back to taking care of everybody else. So she made me stay longer.
Well, congrats on learning how to take care of yourself. I identify with some of what you said. The parts where you're talking about taking care of other people first and pharmacists take care of everybody else. And yeah, I get it. Man, I don't know if it's part of being a woman or a mom, or I don't know how it works. But yeah, I think, I identify with that too. I can relate.
Absolutely. It's a tough one because we think, especially when we have kids, that kids are supposed to come before us, but no. I've learned over time, I can't take care of anybody else. I can't take care of my child. I can't take care of my husband. I can't take care of it. I have to come first because if I'm not okay, nobody else can be okay. So I come first before everybody else, even my son. And so my son and I talk about that too, because he even knows, like, when I'm having a bad day, he's like, mommy needs to take time to take care of herself. I just need to leave her alone or anything like that. So, because it's important that I take care of myself.
Yeah, self-preservation is very important, and it shouldn't have to come to the point where you feel like that's really that important. We should be doing it all along, and until somebody makes us stop and learn it, sometimes we just don't. And yeah, I'm glad you did. I'm glad you took the time.
Yeah, I am too. And that's why I hope I teach that to my son. Teach him that he needs to take better care of himself so he doesn't ever have to, I can't save him from everything, but I can at least teach him that he can take better care of himself so he never has to maybe see some of those things.
I know that sometimes there are pivotal moments in our lives where we're forced to take care of ourselves. You just mentioned one where you were having thoughts that were not healthy, and this manager helped you, took you to the ER. Can you think of any other examples in your life that you'd like to share where you were kind of forced to take care of something?
Yes, I unfortunately have dealt with alcohol issues throughout my life. Once I went to college, of course, I grew up in a very strict household. So when I went to college, stuff hit the fan, and needless to say, 0 to 100. And so I used alcohol as a way to numb my brain so I didn't have to think. It was my unhealthy coping mechanism. And it was just, if I was having a bad day, drink. Come home from a bad day in the pharmacy, drink. It was a great way for me to just shut it all off. So I didn't have to think about it, didn't have to worry about it. I could just ignore the problem. And that's what I did for years. And unfortunately, it hit me hard. Everyone says, oh, we've all driven in the car after drinking a little too much. We just haven't gotten caught. Well, I got caught, and it was not good. I actually ran my car into a retaining wall, ripped my front wheel off, and somehow got it home and parked it like a champ. But yeah, I don't know how, but I did. And then the police, somebody followed me home. So they had saw the accident and then followed me home, called the police, and I was too busy yelling at them instead of going into my home. So I was on the street yelling at them because, I'm clearly not very nice. And police showed up, and unfortunately I was arrested and taken in. And so I was charged with DUI and a few other things because of hitting private property and all that. They didn't want to press charges because there was no damage. There was more damage to my car than the retaining wall.
Sounds like it.
Yeah. Yes. So, but I had to go through, it was a very challenging situation because I had to get a lawyer, I had to go to court. I had to go through 6 months of alcohol education, which was alcohol education, but it was more therapy. I really appreciated him a lot. Like, he helped me out quite a bit because I had taken this whole situation as I was now a bad person. Like, I had made this mistake. I had gotten in trouble. I had gotten a DUI, and now I'm a bad person. But I learned through this situation that I was a good person who made a mistake. And that's when I really started to learn about making mistakes, and that making mistakes are a good thing because I can learn to grow. It's when I stopped being so upset about making mistakes and just accepting them. I started to make less mistakes after that because that's when I started to realize that making them is okay. It's how we come out the other end of them. It's how we process them, how we take them on, what we do with them that makes the person. So the whole situation ended up taking like a decent amount of time because I ended up getting a not great judge. The police, it was a hot mess. It was not such a great situation, but I learned a lot from the situation. I knew it was never going to happen again because I was never going to put myself in that situation again. I continued to drink after that. Like, it was not the situation that got me to quit. I have quit since. I'm over 4 years sober now.
Congrats.
Thank you. But that is not the situation that got me to stop. I did continue to drink up until 2019. Actually, January 1st of 2019 was the first day I stopped drinking. So it took a few more years, but it really taught me that I'm going to fall, and I'm going to fall hard, but it's about getting up, figuring out what you're going to do with the situation, how you're going to come out the other end, and that there are people that aren't going to ditch you. You know, I thought all my friends were going to just ditch me. They didn't. They stood by me, and they supported me through the situation. And that, you know, making mistakes is okay. It's not a personal failing to make mistakes. I mean, I'm a perfectionist at heart. I want everything to go perfect. But that time in my life is when I stopped being one, because nothing's perfect. We're human. Nothing can be perfect. And I had to stop because trying to make myself perfect was probably like half the reason why I had so much anxiety problems, is because I was always trying to make things perfect. I was worrying about what was going to happen next. And I think that was just a huge wake-up call for me that made me realize I had to stop and really realize that life's going to happen, and I have to stop worrying about what's going to happen next because I can only control what's going to happen now. And being okay with those mistakes, because I do make less. I make them. I'm human, but I have to own them. I have to learn from them, and then I have to move on. It's kind of my mantra. I talk about it in my book too. You have to own it. You have to learn from it and have to move on, because accountability, you got to take it. You can't shirk it off. You can't ignore it. It's just going to get worse if you do. So that's really when I started to do those things.
Ashley, congratulations on 4 years of sobriety.
Thank you.
And I'm happy that nobody was hurt.
Yes.
That's great.
Me too.
Yeah. Now, you're the first pharmacist on my podcast who's ever gotten a DUI and talked about it. I don't know if anybody else has. They haven't talked about it.
No.
But tell me, what happens to a pharmacist when they get a DUI? Because they tell us in pharmacy school, walk the line, keep your nose, clean. don't make mistakes, what happens?
So I've talked to a lot of people about this because I've had students come to me. I've had a lot of people come to me and ask me, what do I do? Self-report. Don't let the board find out about it. Self-report. Because if the board finds out that you didn't report it, you're going to get in trouble and it's going to be worse. Mm-hmm. So as soon as it happened, I called the board. I called my boss and told him, and he was like, okay, it's your first offense. Thank you for telling me. And then I called the board and I said, this is what's happened. And they're like, thank you for calling us. I had 2 licenses at the time, so I had to call 2 boards. And they both were like, okay, thank you for letting us know. On your next time when you renew your license, you have to fill out the long form. So there is no longer a short form. There's a long form that you have to fill out. And you have to provide all of the court documents and everything, letting them know what happened and everything like that. But because I self-reported and the board didn't find out about it beforehand, it was not a big deal. Because I was already going through everything that they would have me do. So as long as you're doing everything that you're supposed to be doing and you self-report, then you're good to go. And as long as it's your first offense, if you don't do it again. I mean, truly don't do it again, because that's another thing is that I made sure, like, if I was going to drink, I wasn't driving. And if I knew we were going to dinner and my husband was going to, I wasn't drinking so I could drive. Or like, I made sure there was no way in heck it was happening again, because once was plenty for me. So, I cannot stress enough, like, don't do it again, to make sure, because it gets stricter and worse things happen the more it happens with the board. So as long as you can keep it one time, and you have to do it for 18 months. So 2 times that you renew your license, I believe you have to do the long form. And I've hit a few snags when I go, because I've now picked up a 3rd license and I'm about to get my 4th. So you do have to do more paperwork, of course, when you do go to get a license. But I mean, I did it to myself. So it is something that I know I have to do, but it's not going to go away. It's there. It doesn't come up on a simple background check, but of course the board does more of a background check than just a simple one. So you do have to give all of that information every time you go through processes. But again, I did it to myself, so I know that that's part of the process. So.
Yeah, you're very accountable, I can tell. I mean, you're very honest, and you want to make sure that you follow the application to a T. Much respect. You're doing it all right.
And like I said, I did it to myself. So it's nothing I can't hide it. It's not something that there's anything I can do about. So I own it. It's there. It is what it is. So, and that's what I tell people when they ask me. I'm like, just self-report. You can't hide it. You can't make it go away. It's there. So just self-report it, because they're going to take that a lot better if you just tell them. Don't let them find out.
Yes, and I'm sure you're not the first and only person ever to get a DUI as a pharmacist, and she's shaking her head no. But thank you for sharing your experience, because like I said, you're the first one that I know of that's admitted to having a DUI as a pharmacist.
Absolutely. It's not an easy thing for any professional to talk about, but, it's happened. And I know the information is better for me to share. That way others know, what it's like. And yeah, it's not fun, but again, you can get through it and come out the other end. Just again, being proactive is always best.
Absolutely. Now, I'm going to pivot over to a question that I know some listener wants me to ask. I'm going to ask this question that I know some listener wants me to ask. And that is, you said you're going for your 3rd and 4th state license. So what are these licenses for?
Well, so I have 3 right now. My husband works for the railroad. So every time he's gotten a promotion, we've had to move. So that means I get to acquire another license. So I'm licensed in 3 states right now. We've since moved to a 4th. And luckily, the place I teach said I'd collected enough at this point that they were like, you don't need to get it in our state, but I've chosen to go ahead and get it because I'm like, you never know. So I figure I've started the process. I figure I might as well get it. So that's why I'm getting my 4th, just to have it. But yes, I've been collecting them over time. It's been fun.
That's all right. Hey, some people collect stamps. You collect licenses. Why not?
It's an expensive hobby, I got to tell you.
Yes, I'm sure. Well, hey, a lot of people don't know this, but I know you are an Ohio girl at heart, right?
I am born and raised.
Yeah, OH.
IO. He agrees. My dog agrees. So, never lived in Ohio, but he agrees. We watch plenty of Ohio State football. So
awesome. Yeah. And then you went to pharmacy school in Indiana, right?
Yes, I went to Butler. Yep. Butler over in Indianapolis.
Awesome. And you have moved around to other states. Where are the other 2 licenses that you currently hold?
So we've been in Ohio, we've been in Maryland, we've been in West Virginia, and now we're in Florida.
Okay. What's next?
No,
Florida's the next one?
No, nothing. He's corporate office is down in Florida, so he best be staying there.
Okay. So Florida is the 4th and final stop.
Better be, knock on wood.
All right. Awesome. Now that you're in Florida, what are you doing for work?
So I teach pharmacy technician students at Florida State College at Jacksonville. I love it. I'm teaching a group of them right now that are about to start their practicals here at the end of April. So we're almost done. And then next year, we're going to be starting a dual program for high school students to do pharmacy technician while they're in 2 periods of their day. So I might be teaching high schoolers next year. So
wow,
yeah,
you're brave.
I am looking forward to the experience. I'm the lead instructor of the pharmacy technician instructors, and my boss asked me to go talk to the high schoolers, and so which I have no problems doing. And so we were talking about pharmacy, everything like that. And one of the students, this is clearly an awesome compliment coming from a high schooler, asked if I was going to be teaching the class because I seemed like I'd be a really cool instructor. And so I said, I was asked to come talk about the pharmacy stuff. We have not discussed that. He asked my boss again after. So she looked at me and goes, can you please consider this? So it looks like I might be teaching high schoolers next year, which is kind of a cool opportunity because I was like, I never would have thought I'd teach pharmacy to high schoolers, which is kind of a cool opportunity. So I might be teaching pharmacy stuff to high schoolers next year, but they seem like pretty cool, kids. So who were really interested. We had 26 of them who were interested in it. So I'm like, why not try something new? So
well, it's an opportunity to, what is it called? Pave the path, blaze the trail, right? If you're the first, you can own it.
Right.
So good luck with that.
I think that it seems like a very neat opportunity. And, I always tell my pharmacy technician students that if you want to become a pharmacist, by all means, please do it. I always teach up with my students. So, I already have one from not this past group, but the last group that I taught who's already trying to get into pharmacy school. So, that's why not? You're halfway there with the stuff that, I teach you, you get little bits, right? So go for it and just do the rest of it. So, I enjoy it a lot. I really enjoy teaching them. And then the other part of my time goes to the organization because we're still growing because we just finished, we're into year 3. So we're growing rapidly, which we never expected to grow as rapidly as we are. And so now we're working on, money, because currently the board members were doing this, because we want to. And now we would like to start getting some grants and building a structure and doing all that stuff now so that we can start working towards building up the organization.
It's a ripe time for that because so many people have experienced mental health issues throughout the pandemic, feeling isolated, depressed, unconnected. And I'm sure you guys can be leaders as people emerge and admit, I have a problem and I need some help. So I wish you all the best as you expand.
Absolutely. I have a group of wonderful board members who are all very passionate about this, whether it's just lived experience or whether it's, counselor or public health or whatever. We've got 12 of us, and, we all bring different things to the table. And working with them is fabulous. I love our board, and they're wonderful people and very dedicated to doing all of this. So, it's been a great opportunity, and it's just been wonderful to work with all of them and to do this in a way that we are passionate about, but also in a way that we feel is the best, because I don't have deadlines for people. I tell them, this is what needs done. Go to and do it. I trust them, so there's no micromanaging. I trust them to do it. So it's the leadership, the way I've always wanted to lead. But before, when I was with the other organization that I volunteered with, when I was a leader, I couldn't, I was still being micromanaged by other people. So now it's nice to be able to do this and allow people to thrive in the ways they're supposed to. And I just allow people to do their things. And it's neat when they don't need me, because that's the point, is I see it as a leader. I should be able to give them the opportunity to thrive without me. And I be able to sit back and just be there. And if they need me, they ask. The best meetings are the ones where I'm not even involved. I'm just there. So, that's the type of leadership role that I like to take. And that's the way I feel like it should be done. They should be able to lead without me.
Have you ever read the book Good to Great by Jim Collins?
I've not.
I know you like to read, so I'm going to recommend that book for you. And Good to Great has this famous story in there where there's this image, the setting of a school bus, right? And somebody, the leader, is driving the bus, right? And they put the right people on the bus. And it's an analogy for having an organization that's well run. If you can have somebody driving the bus, the right person, like you, driving We Matter Too, and you've got all these board members who know their role and can accept your delegation of duties, then you've got all the right people on the bus. And that's got to be a good feeling.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, I just watch it and it'll happen. And it's that great feeling that you just watch it happen. And you can't help but be proud of all of them. And I just know that we're going to continue forward, and we know that this year feels like it's going to be an even better year than it was last year. And we always have that feeling. And John's like, oh, I feel like this is going to be a great year. And so, yeah, we just keep growing and thriving. And like I said, back in August of 2019, when I told them this won't be the last time you hear from me, I didn't know how I was going to do it. I knew I'd do it. And we're here now. And I look back at that and I go, well, I wasn't wrong. I knew I'd do it. I figured it out, and we're still figuring it out, and we'll still continue forward, and we'll still grow, and find ways to get more of people's experiences out there as well as my own. But, and that's what I tell people, pharmacy people will ask me all the time, this is so, how did you even decide to do this? I go, I got really mad. And I said I needed to figure out a way to get this message out there. And then I did it. So I went and did it. And that's what we did.
Yeah, you used your pain for a purpose, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's what,
Yeah, much respect. That's great.
what the fire is. And John tells me all the time, I think you underestimated how mad you were. And I was like, yeah, I probably did. Because, that's really what drives us most of the time. But the anger's mostly gone. Now it's just drive to keep doing it because there's so many other people out there who've also felt this way. So I think that's what drives me more now, is that there's so many of us.
Well, I appreciate what you do. And on that note, I want to pivot over to one of the other topics that I invited you to talk about tonight. You are an entertainer. And I know this may seem kind of strange to my listeners, but I consider a TEDx speaker an entertainer because it's recorded live. Oh my goodness, under all this pressure. And you got to deliver a talk in front of a live audience. It was recorded. It can be found on YouTube. I will put a link in the show notes. Can you talk about that for me?
Yeah, it was a really great experience. And yeah, it's not just like get up and talk. There's all types of prep. I got a coach, which was actually my advisor. Because Marshall, I'm a grad student at Marshall. We went to pharmacy school to learn how to pharmacy. We didn't go to pharmacy school to learn how to teach. So I'm actually a grad student at Marshall learning how to teach. Almost done. I have a dissertation left and then I will be finished.
Is that a PhD you're pursuing? Sorry to interrupt.
No, not a problem. An EDD, so a doctorate in education, focused in curriculum and instruction. So,
nice.
Yeah. So I'm almost done, but she was my advisor. Well, she is my advisor. So she was my coach, which was a great experience. We work well together. And so they helped me like flesh out my talk and everything. And we worked on it and practiced it. And then when we got into town for the actual TEDx, we had a tech rehearsal. We had a dress rehearsal. Like, this is like a real thing here. And we did all the practicing with the lights and this and that. So it was a really cool experience. And then getting to do it live. Now, it was in 2021, so we were still with a decent amount of COVID restrictions. So the audience wasn't big. It was mainly speakers, families, and that. But it was still a really cool experience to get to do it and all of that. And the opportunity just alone. Ever since I saw the very first TEDx TED Talk I ever saw was Brené Brown's Shame and Vulnerability, which I enjoyed those talks. And I always said, oh, I want to do one day. Like, that was a bucket list moment. And getting to do one was just really super cool. There was a lot of screaming involved when I heard I was going to get to do one. So I had to explain to my parents what a TED Talk was. They did not know. So I had to explain that. But getting to do one was really cool. And I was super happy with the talk that I was able to give. And getting the platform to give a talk like that was really important, because the talk alone and having that type of platform was just immensely important, because knowing that the stories matter, we matter, and that the labels don't, neither does the stigma, that alone, getting that word out there was what mattered the most.
You did a great job. I enjoyed watching it. And the whole time I was listening, I was like, wow, this is something that pharmacists don't always talk about. We help people with mental health issues, but we're not always the ones who admit to having the mental health issues. It was kind of refreshing. You really just like cut down stigma with an axe when you do that, because it makes it normal for somebody who's a medical professional to have mental health issues.
Right.
So much respect for having the guts to get up there and say all that.
Thank you. Yeah. And actually, right after I had my postpartum depression, I started talking to a patient about it. I had just gotten back into the pharmacy. It had been a couple weeks. I was back in the pharmacy, and she was very worried about it because of like the perception of it. She went to church and all of this stuff, and her husband, and I told her, I said, well, I deal with that type of stuff. No, not you. And I'm like, but no, really. And I was like, I was just missing for like a week and a half. And she was like, oh, where were you? And I was like, well, I was just in the hospital because of, she goes, oh my. And like that conversation, the first time I had that conversation made me realize I didn't tell her a lot. I just told her little bits and pieces, which in my opinion is not going over the line of anything bad or unethical, just enough that it told her I'm a safe place. I'm a trusted medical professional that she can come to talk about these things. And it showed her I'm a human being who also goes through these things. And I can still, be that professional, that pharmacist, and do my job. And people trust me. And I think that made me realize, oh, I should share more. And actually, I have with patients, I've shared and students. Because you can always tell when you ask a patient or a student a question and they get this look of pensiveness, like, I don't know if you're safe. I don't know if I can share with you. How much can I tell? And in those moments, I know every time if I just share that I also struggle with these problems, that is the barrier that breaks down and they can tell me and they can share too.
Yeah, I think that's part of showing empathy, don't you think? It helps them feel seen, heard, and understood, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that it builds that trust with that person. And then they feel like I can come back to you. I can tell you these things. I can share with you. And when you have that with people, then you have that with them. And I think that's why we've been able to, again, build that community on Twitter, because I respond to those comments and those things, and I show that empathy and I tell them, you're appreciated. Thank you for sharing. We build that community the same way we would build that trust in a pharmacy or with students. It's the same thing. And that's why we've been able to do that, because again, when you tell people they're valid, their feelings are valid, that what their experience is valid, you bring that connection there. I think when a lot of us with mental health issues or neurodivergence or anything like that, when we share our experiences with people, so many times we get shut down or we get invalidated. And I think when a community of people or anyone is willing to listen and just validate, I hear you. I appreciate you sharing that with me. Your feelings are valid. I think when someone can just do that for anybody, you're able to give somebody something they may not have had before when sharing those experiences. And so frequently we have that. And I think just giving that a space to people where they know they can come and they don't get shut down is important, because it happens too frequently. And that's really the space that we have now. It's what I try to do just in general with people that I meet. I've become a lot less judgmental of a person through a lot of this, because I used to be so judgmental. And I realized that the more I thought about it. And then as time has gone on, I've tried very hard to be less judgmental. And now I just kind of meet people where they are. And I just am like, I just don't really mind or care about any backstory. I'm just meeting a person. And I feel lighter, believe it or not. I feel like a lighter person when I don't carry all that around, because I'm just meeting people. I don't really care about all the rest of it. And it's nice because you can just meet so many more people when you don't go on with the preconceived notions or reading a book by its cover or worried about labels and all that other stuff. If you're just meeting human beings and talking to human beings about experiences, it just makes it so much more enjoyable.
I'm happy to hear that you're enjoying your new look on life. I know what you mean about being judgmental, but once you realize that you have a problem with it, I think that's the first step. And then somebody like you, who is a, a judger in recovery here, is able to make a safe space and a community on Twitter where people can be seen, heard, and understood and share their mental health issues and feel validated that that's actually a normal feeling, whatever it is that they have shared.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, and I kind of blame community pharmacy a little bit because it's hard, because you have to follow all these silly, I'm going to say silly because they are silly rules that these corporations put on you that you have to follow. And it makes you judgmental, and you don't realize you're doing it until you take the time to reflect on what's happening. And when I started to realize and reflect on it, I mean, there's one reason why I left community pharmacy is it burnt me out. But as I started to reflect on it, it had put these biases on me that I hadn't realized had happened. And then as I started to really look, I realized, oh, these biases and these judgments that came that I didn't realize had come, I need to get rid of these. And I need to start getting rid of them more. And then it just makes it so much better when you're viewing people without those filters.
Yeah, you're doing it. You're recovering from judgment zone, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
I know what you mean about community practice, because those are arbitrary numbers that you're supposed to meet and arbitrary requirements that you're supposed to, check off all these boxes in order to be a good pharmacist. Been there. I know what you mean.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm glad that you're more self-aware, and I think you're going to be able to help more people. Like I said, creating that safe space is something that you can do because you are less judgmental and you're trying to encourage people to reveal their issues so that they can get support. And that's what you're all about. I love that.
Absolutely.
And another way for you to help people with their getting over stigma, these marks of shame that they feel like they carry around with them for having a mental health diagnosis. You help them overcome it, I think, through your book, I Matter Too. Would you like to talk about your book?
Sure. Yeah. One of those angry moments is I sat down and was like, I'm just going to write it all out in a book because I was so mad.
It's cathartic, isn't it?
It is. And when I was going through the editing phase, I was like, ooh, we got to tone this down. Now, I did have, I self-published my book, but it did go through peer readers. I did have peer readers read them. I had a pharmacist read it. I had a friend read it because I needed a lay perspective, because I do have a lot of medical stuff in it, and I wanted to make sure that it still made sense to people. I had a peer support, a fellow lived experience peer support person read it. And then I had a friend who also has PTSD, but also is a librarian. So they read it for me as well. And so they were saying, but you can't take all the anger out because there's a point to the anger and people need to feel the anger. So I agree. So that's why there's still the swear words. And that's why there's a lot of the very pointed, this might offend you, but it needs to offend you. That's the point of this. That's why I don't sugarcoat things in the book, because I've gone through a lot of situations in my life that have led up to how I've become the person that I am. And that's why I'm so passionate about the work that I do now, is because I'm not the only one who advocates, who has a backstory like I have. And some people's are worse than mine. Some people's aren't as bad as mine. It's not the Olympics. We're not sitting here and comparing stories, because all of the stories matter. But when I talk about the stigma and the discrimination in there, the point of it is that this stuff does offend people, but it has to, because you can't change anything if you don't see it at its face value. I can't sugarcoat things. there are plenty of books out there that if you want to read the watered down version of it, you can. I didn't want the watered down version. I wanted the real version. The punch you in the face. This is what happens. This is the discrimination. This is the bad stuff. This is the good stuff. This is all of it. And that's why there's a warning at the beginning that you need to take your time. If it bothers you, set it down, walk away, make sure you're taking breaks, because again, it's not an easy book to even my parents even struggled through it, because I didn't tell them everything. I mean, they know everything in the book, but they didn't know the detail to which I went into a lot of the things. So they even needed to take breaks because they said it was even bothering them to read it. And so I wanted it to be a book that helps people navigate life in the sense that they can see that it gets hard, it sucks, but you can get through it if you want to do the work to get through it. And the stigma and discrimination is an area that I've started researching since I went through it. It's in there because it needs to be brought to attention. It happens too frequently. We cannot have people going through stuff that I've gone through. We need to do better. And the only way we can do better is if people are being made aware of the situations that happen. And so that's why I put as much of it in there as I did, because this is what happens. And it has to be read. It needs to be learned about. And I'm doing plenty of other stuff that, will happen. My dissertation is going to be in how we can improve medical training so that we're decreasing stigma. Because again, the only way we can fix these problems is if we're having these conversations.
Yeah, it becomes normal to talk about the more you talk about it.
Yeah. And not the versions of, oh, we shouldn't say it like that. We should say, no, you need to learn about it and learn about it how we experience it, because it's the way we experience it. There's no need to water it down or make it more palpable. Like, why? I don't deal with it in a more palpable way. So we should talk about it in the way that I deal with it so that you know how it happens. And language is important. I used to think that language didn't matter. And then I went through 2019 and I learned very much that language matters. And now I research it in the sense of, how language matters because of stigma and discrimination. So yes, language matters. It doesn't take much time to understand what you're saying and making sure that you're talking to somebody in a humane way instead of disrespecting them and taking away their autonomy or treating them with disrespect. I mean, basic levels of respect are very easy to do, and you can give it to everybody. And basic levels don't need to be, you don't need to gain it. You don't need to, get it from somebody, or everybody can get basic levels of respect. A hi, how are you? You can treat everybody with respect. It's not hard to do. And every human being should be at least given that, because, and yes, I understand there's a lot of other caveats and a lot of other situations, like nuances that come along with that. I get it. But at the same time, without knowing somebody at face value, you can be respectful. I disagree with people all the time, but I can at least respect them.
Yes. Well, I must say I enjoyed the book. It was full of a lot of mental health diagnoses that you have. Yeah. And it was very interesting to hear your experience with them. Like at what age this came about, or what this label's like for you. Because if you've met one person with agoraphobia, you've met one person with agoraphobia. They're not all the same. Some people have problems leaving their house. Some people have problems just in grocery stores, or, it's not the same for everyone. So how cool would it be for us as pharmacists to, every time we meet a patient, be able to read their book? Like, how did this anxiety come about? Or how did you get your PTSD? We can't read a book written by every single patient that comes into our practices. Now, I'm not in clinical practice anymore. I don't know about you, but I know there are people who are going to listen to this podcast who are in clinical practice, and I think that's food for thought. So next time you meet somebody, and I'm talking to you, my listener, next time you meet somebody who has a mental health diagnosis, just think, wouldn't it be really nice if you knew how that diagnosis came about and what it's like for them? Because we can only scrape the surface as pharmacists in the community practice setting. We can't dig that deep. But you, ma'am, you, Ashley, you dug deep and you shared everything, and much respect for not holding back.
Thank you. Yeah, I knew in that, and again, when I speak, when I talk, like, I'm an open book. Like, I'll share it all. I'll share the details, like, because I know not everybody feels comfortable talking about it, but I want people to understand that it's there, it happens, but it doesn't keep me from living my life. It just makes my life a little bit more, difficult to navigate. Like, I have to navigate life a little differently. And, the autism and the ADHD, understanding those so that I can navigate certain things, helps me. And, understanding my anxiety or understanding the agoraphobia, like, those things, they help me navigate life. But it doesn't keep me from doing anything if I want to do them. And that's the important thing to, like, understand the differences in. And, and yes, when my PTSD is bad, yes, it keeps me from doing things. And other mental illnesses like schizophrenia, that, people that I know with schizophrenia, that yes, it is debilitating for them and it is hard for them to navigate life, but they are still people who do things and are able to do things. And there are some wonderful advocates out there who share their life and share their experiences so that they're able to show that, like, there are these wonderful people. They just happen to have schizophrenia, and their experiences, when they share them, and I've learned so much from a few of them, and and it's a debilitating situation that they have to navigate, but they're wonderful people. And I think that's the important thing to realize, is that just because they have schizophrenia does not mean the person has changed. They just got this piece that's been added.
Yes, person first.
Yes.
What you're referring to is they're a person first. They're just a person with schizophrenia or a person with a mental health issue. Absolutely. That's a great point. Now, going back to me reading the book, I listened to the book. Hey, I'm a cheater. I listened to the audiobook.
Hey,
I must say, one of my it's all the same. It's the same text. It's just, an audio. But anyways, I wanted to say, I know that you are a bookworm, and I loved that throughout the book, you threw in parts of books that you enjoyed, and poems and song lyrics and things. So I just wanted to say that I really enjoyed that. And you had recommended some books, and I just want you to know at least one of them is now on my book list. So thank you. And that book is Leaders Eat Last: Why Some Teams Pull Together and Others Don't, by Simon Sinek. So thank you for that recommendation.
It is a fabulous book. I read it right after I went through everything in 2019, believe it or not. I read that book, and it just solidified even more that I was not wrong after what I went through, and, like, why the team disintegrated. It just validated me while I was reading that book. And that it was a fabulous book. And it's really a lot of how I lead, and really why I didn't fit in that group, and why we as a group now work so well together, is because I've always been that type of person. I will take all the blame, but I will be the first to shine light on all my people, because that's just the leader I've always been. Unfortunately, the group I used to be with, they were the opposite. They all love the limelight and will love to give the blame to other people. And generally, I was taking a lot of the blame. So I realized that, that book it's one of those books that gives you lots of good little things. So you'll love the book. It will give you lots of those good, little tidbits of information.
Well, thank you. Thanks again for the suggestion.
Absolutely.
Lots of great stories in this book. I recommend it. I Matter Too by Ashley Perkins, PharmD.
Yes. Well, thank you. I'm glad you enjoyed it.
All right. Now I got to ask you about the process of creating the audiobook. How did that come to be? Because I think it's fantastic that you created it.
So there is a website that you can use to get all different types of freelance people. Actually, I got the cover of my book. I got her from there too. It's called Fiverr, Fiverr, Fiver.
Fiverr. Mm-hmm.
Yes, and you can get on it, and there's all different types of freelancers. And so again, the cover of my book, she designed that for me. I got her from there. And so I was like, oh, I got my cover designer from there. I should look on there and see if there's one there. So of course I was scanning through, and I'm like, she looks like she'd be fabulous. So I looked, and then she had some audio clips. So I listened to the audio clips, and it was just love at first hear. I just was like, this is perfect. So I sent her a message, and we just hit it off right away. And she was a fabulous narrator. And she took care of everything. And it took about 3 months for her to read the whole book. But she also enjoyed it and everything. And so I really appreciated her because she just did a fabulous job.
It was a long book too. I think it was 9.5 hours long.
Yes, it is. It is. And I actually took a lot of stuff out, believe it or not, but it'll be in the second book that I've started to work on. So I pulled a lot of stuff out because...
Yeah, let's talk about that.
So, yes.
What's going on with the second book here?
Second book. So when I figured out that I was autistic, I was like, oh man, I already published the book. But funny, I can continue to write. But this is what's been interesting about the first book was all of writing things that had already happened, right? So I'd already been through all of them. This book is kind of a neat experience because I'm writing it as it's happening. So all of this I'm writing as I'm learning about myself and autism. I found out about 6 months ago. And now it's I'm peeling back the onion. I'm learning about myself because I've always been autistic. This isn't something that just popped up. I've always been autistic. I'm now going through and looking through the lens of my life. And my mind is blown because how I did not pick up on this sooner is beyond me. Because I look back and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is so obvious. It is so obvious now that I'm looking back on it. I'm like, how did we not pick up on this? I know how we didn't pick up on this is because I'm female, one.
Women often are diagnosed later in life.
Yeah. And I don't like the high functioning label. I despise it actually. But because I am high functioning, again, it's missed. So I now am looking back at everything and it's very obvious. And my brain, the way my brain works, I'm just like, oh yeah, that's why I do that. And it's been a remarkable experience, but it's that final piece that fits in. And so I've been able to start writing about it. And so I will write a second book. And I'm also putting the myths of mental health in there, talking about a few things in there that I wanted to break down. So there'll be research in this one too, because I want to talk about things that we see and we hear talked about, but aren't true. And I really want to talk about that, especially like the medication part. Like you can just pop a pill and it fixes your problem. And I'm like, but it doesn't. And the way we talk about suicide, and the people who die by suicide, I want to talk about that. So we're going to talk about that in the book. And so there's quite a few myths, and the myth about curing autism, I'm going to talk about that. That actually came from my community of people. I asked if there were any myths that they would want talked about, and that was one of them. So I've been researching that, and because we know we can't cure autism. We are a neurotype, so that is just us. So I'm going to talk about that, and I've been researching that and everything, which has kind of helped me learn about myself too. So that's kind of, in a nutshell, what I've been working on.
I'm kind of excited for you to get this formal diagnosis and everything of autism because not because it's another label or anything like that. It doesn't make you any more interesting, but it will help you on a road to adapting and adapting in a different way too, because labels do lead to services and understanding.
Absolutely. And, I have a young son who's 7, and I already see the ADHD and autism in him. I mean, it's very clear. He has a therapist he works with, and she said, as long as it's not a problem for him, we don't need to do any testing, but it's very, very clear. We just help him navigate, and we have wonderful conversations because he's like, I'm like mommy. So we have very wonderful conversations. And it's being able to watch him, and things that I would have before seen as just like behavior, I now see as him being overstimulated, or different situations. I'm now able to, I see them differently. And so I'm able to help him better. So it's definitely been a great experience for me.
Yeah, it's like looking at life through a different lens. I think you had mentioned that earlier, or a different filter. And yeah, it's just different. It's neither good nor bad. It's just different. And I like how you're looking at things. I'm cheering you on here from Ohio. And I look forward to being connected with you for a long time to see how you come along, and just support you. And I want to listen to your next book too. So please make the audiobook.
Thank you.
I love audiobooks.
I won't lie. The other one took me 3 years. So it will take me time, but it will come. When I say I'm going to do something, I'll always do it. I just can't promise it'll happen quickly.
Hey, that's all right. That's all right. That gives me a reason to keep in touch with you, keep a couple touches here and there and say, hey, how's it going? How's the book coming? And just see where you're at.
Absolutely.
Now, Ashley, as we start to wrap this up, is there anything else that you would like to share?
I don't think so. Is there any other questions that you would like to ask me?
Sure. Could you share your website?
Absolutely. So our website is wematter2.org, and that is for our organization's website. And then I have a personal website, which is drashleyperkins.com.
Is that doctor as in DOCTOR or DR?
DR.
Okay, got it. Well, I'll put both of those in the show notes, and if anybody wants to reach you, they can reach out.
Absolutely.
All right, Ashley, thank you so much for being here on the Pharmacist Voice podcast to share how you use your voice as a pharmacist, an advocate, an educator, and an entertainer. You take care.
Thank you.
Thanks again to Dr. Ashley Perkins for being my guest here on the Pharmacist Voice podcast, episode 212. I am inspired by the many ways in which she uses her voice. She is an author, a TEDx speaker, an educator, and a mental health advocate. And I love how passionate she is about fighting the stigma surrounding mental health diagnoses. If you personally have ever felt misjudged or misunderstood because you have a mental illness, or if you have actually misjudged or misunderstood someone with a mental illness, I hope this episode resonated with you. If you're interested in links to the people, places, and things mentioned in this episode, please visit thepharmacistvoice.com to read the show notes. In the show notes today specifically, you'll find links to We Matter Too, Dr. Ashley Perkins, the books we talked about. There were 3. They are I Matter Too, Good to Great, and Leaders Eat Last. You'll also find my social media links and much more. If you know someone who needs to hear this episode, please share it with them. And if you like this podcast, please subscribe to or follow the Pharmacist Voice podcast on your favorite podcast player and YouTube to get each new episode right when it comes out. Thanks for listening today. I'll talk to you next week.